Fine.
Yes.
Hello, President Frank.
Hi, Alan. How are you? Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Well, we have this very distinguished group of people who are all very interested in you perhaps expanding on. I don't know if you want everyone to introduce themselves. Maybe we just go a quick round of introductions, starting with our great Dean, Henry Ford.
Hi, Alan. Henry Ford. I'm the Dean of the Yale School of Medicine. Just very excited to hear about your interest, and because I think everything meshes very nicely with our new curriculum, with great emphasis on social determinants of health and environmental factors, the environmental impact on health. So look forward to this discussion.
And Alan, I'm chair of the Department of Public Health Sciences, and very much looking forward to having our conversation today. So.
Alan, well, good to see you again. I'm acting dean, but as you know, in the law school, but just for a couple of weeks. I don't know if you saw the announcement. We have a great interim dean, Nell Newton, coming in a couple of weeks, former dean of Notre Dame, to lead us for the year while we're doing a dean search.
Good to see you again, Dean.
And I'm Cindy Monroe. I'm the Dean of the School of Nursing and Health Studies, which includes nursing all the way from undergraduate through PhD, and also the undergraduate public health program at UM and health sciences program.
Great.
Josh Friedman, Development. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
And on screen, we have Professor Kumar. Naresh, you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, my name is Naresh Kumar. I came in contact with Alan several years ago when he came to UM campus and introduced his book, The Poisoned.
Okay.
Not only did I read this book, and there was a large number of people in attendance to hear his book. The book is a summary of his real world experiences that he has gone through. He almost died, and I think he beautifully narrates his experiences, how some of these toxicants that are found in our homes can be catastrophic, can induce immunological disorder that he has been suffering for the past many years. And since then, I do invite him to share some of his experiences in my class on environmental health. And students love that. As a matter of fact, I call there is a tremendous amount of environmental illiteracy around the country. And he has been engaged, I think, in many of these issues, discussing with different stakeholders. I think it has been a pleasure working with him. So not only he has become one of the friends, but on and off, we talk about many of these issues, and he bring very intriguing problems to me most of the time. So welcome, Alan.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar.
And before we start, I just want to thank you for again agreeing to serve on the President's Council. Much appreciated your continued commitment to the university. But we're all ears, Alan.
Thank you, President Frank. So shall I begin?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, first of all, everybody, thank you for your very kind words. And I'm very pleased to be a part of this Zoom from Southern California. President Frank, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for your strong leadership at the University of Miami, and all the deans and the chair that's in attendance today, including Joshua. Thank you for your leadership at the university and everybody moving forward. Dean Ford, Dr. Kumar, Dean Monroe, Chairman Lee. Thank you for your interest in this subject. President Frank has allotted 1 hour for me to make a presentation. However, I'm going to only take approximately a half hour, because afterwards, I think it would be fruitful to use the remaining half hour to have a Q&A session and discussion among all of us. We've got a lot of brain power in this room, and we ought to utilize it beginning today. The slides that you were about to see contain a lot of data. Don't worry about absorbing all the details, because I will be emailing you this PowerPoint presentation so you can go at it in detail. So I'll submit to you that each of you have a direct stake in what I'll be sharing with you today. The purpose in my presentation is to discuss three things. Number one, how widespread is environmentally linked disease globally? Number two, how are America's top universities addressing this problem? And number three, how is the University of Miami measuring up compared to these other top programs in the United States? So to better understand why I am a part of this discussion, let me share with you a little bit about my background. I received my bachelor's of business administration in 1976 and my Juris Doctorate in law in 1979 from the University of Miami. And as Dr. Frenk said, I'm currently on the UN President's Council. After I graduated from the university, I became an organized crime prosecutor in South Florida. And while working inside my office building in the courthouse, I was poisoned by a sick building. It's called sick building syndrome. My chemical exposure damaged my brain and caused me to become hypersensitive to many chemicals and products in our everyday lives. And when I was exposed to these chemicals, I experienced grand mal seizures. So for my protection, my doctors ordered that I be sequestered inside an environmentally safe home in the middle of the Arizona desert. I was tethered to an oxygen tank and restricted to a wheelchair for 8 years. Fortunately, I recovered by taking a new anti-seizure medication. And then thereafter, I jumped back into the legal arena and became a toxic tort lawyer. Has anybody ever seen the movie Erin Brockovich? Raise your hand. Okay, that's based on a true story. The true character is a guy by the name of Jan Schlickman. He's a lawyer. He actually wrote the foreword in my book. And I worked with this firm that Erin Brockovich was in representing environmental victims. So during my journey, I realized that my plight was just a tip of the iceberg of millions of people getting sick and dying from environmentally linked disease every year. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about. So let me see if I can figure out how to get on this screen here and begin the presentation. Okay, do you all see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm not that dumb. Okay. So back in the 90s, I founded a not-for-profit charity called the Environmental Health Foundation. And I put together the nation's top scientists on our scientific advisory board from Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Centers for Disease Control, Environmental Protection Agency, and NIEHS, which is the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences. Back then, Ken Olden was its director. He was appointed by President Bush I. Ken Olden was also on our scientific advisory board. And with this charity, we actually got the attention of some pretty famous people, influential people, including Al Gore, who has supported our efforts as we funded university-based environmental health research. So recently, as Dr. Kumar stated, I wrote a book, an environmental book. So my background here today is not only as a victim, but as a survivor, an advocate, and an environmental lawyer. And these things have brought me here today to share with you my thoughts. So my first question is how widespread is environmentally linked disease in the United States? I'd like to play for you now a snippet of a video that my Environmental Health Foundation produced back in the 90s. It's just going to be 2 minutes. It was hosted by Gene Cernan, who's the commander of Apollo 17, the last man to walk on the moon, who was our spokesperson. And I'm playing this because this message still rings true today. So sit back and have a listen to this 2-minute video.
Since 1950, more than 70,000 chemicals have been introduced into our environment. Few have been tested for their toxic effects on humans. We are conducting a massive toxicological assault on the American population, and our children and our children's children are the experimental animals.
I'm Gene Cernan, and as commander of Apollo 17, I was one of the lucky few to have seen our planet from 250,000 miles in space. Earth, our home, wrapped in a thin, life-sustaining atmosphere, was simply overpowering. And like all Apollo missions, Apollo 17 was a testament to American resolve and know-how. Today, however, I've become aware of another mission, one that may be as challenging as my flight to the moon. It's a mission to alert mankind to the pollutants and to the toxins in our environment that can devastate human health. This is a mission I'm urging you to get behind, because if we don't, this world we call home could be plagued by a host of environmentally linked diseases that could dwarf any we've yet known.
Modern technology has provided mankind with incredible advances and benefits. At the same time, it has introduced an unforeseen burden, the proliferation of dangerous pollutants and chemicals into our environment. Toxins are hurting our health. Chronic disease continues to rise at an alarming rate. Many scientists project that unless we act now, environmental illness will be the epidemic of the 21st century.
So, no doubt, this is a silent epidemic. And connecting environmental exposure to the onset of human disease is often elusive. But this environmental health arena is a fertile opportunity. That's why epigenetic scientific research is exploding, so we can better understand the biochemical mechanisms between environmental exposure and the onset of human disease. So for purposes of this discussion, I'd like to define environmentally linked disease as human disease caused by what you breathe, touch, eat, or drink in your home, school, workplace, or neighborhood. So now let's look at today's reality. You got a little bit of it from Gene Cernan, but look at this. This is the global impact of environmentally linked diseases. 1 in 3 American women develop cancer in their lifetime. 1 in 2 develop cancer. Cancer is the #1 childhood death cause in the United States, all according to the American Cancer Society. And the EPA tells us that 1 of every 15 homes contains unsafe levels of radon gas, which is the 2nd leading cause of lung cancer. And to wrap this cancer point up, 80% of all cancers are caused by environmental exposures in our homes, schools, workplaces, and neighborhoods, according to the National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences. That's 8 out of every 10 cancers is environmentally linked. Harvard says 1 out of every 20 city deaths are linked to outdoor air pollution. The EPA says 75 million Americans become ill each year because of the sick buildings that they're working in. And Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York says that environmental illnesses just in children alone is costing us $77 billion a year. What does the World Health Organization say? 90% of our global population is breathing unsafe, unhealthy air. 85% of all males will develop environmentally linked low sperm counts. And indoor and out pollution causes 6.5 million deaths worldwide. Outdoor pollution kills 3 million people each year. And only 1 in 10 people live in cities that comply with WHO air quality guidelines. Air pollution, both indoor and out, is the biggest global environmental risk, causing 1 in every 9 deaths annually, according to the World Health Organization. So, do the math. If we trust these governmental and university-based statistics, when you add up these daunting numbers, we can extrapolate it that more people become ill and die from environmentally linked disease than all those afflicted with AIDS, war, and COVID combined. Do the math. As outrageous as this sounds, it's true. So, my opinion, I submit to you that to combat this, it all starts with research and education at the university level. And this is what the American Medical Colleges says, that experts see the growing importance of adding environmental health content to medical school curricula. This is where it's going. So, my next slide is going to talk to you about examining how America's top medical universities are meeting this need through scientific research, education, and clinical programs. And more importantly, let's see what UM's position is among our competition. Now let's start diving in to the heart of this message. This is the current NIEHS grants for environmental health research projects in the United States right now. University of California system, 85, Harvard, 39, Columbia, 37, Johns Hopkins, 24, Mount Sinai Medical Center, 21, USC, 19, right in our backyard, FIU, 7, University of Florida, 4, University of South Florida, 2, and the University of Miami, 1 NIEHS grant currently being supported by the federal government. This research can focus on biochemical mechanisms linking environmental exposure to onset disease. And Josh, let me tell you something. These governmental grants makes your job a lot easier because the federal government would be funding this, not our donors. So when a patient walks into a doctor's office or an emergency room and needs treatment, is your diagnosis a bacterial infection, a viral infection, trauma, a tumor? Here's the elephant in the room that's not being addressed. Was it an environmental exposure? Was the patient exposed to new building materials in their office or their home? Was it a pesticide exposure? Was it an occupational exposure to construction materials? Our doctors need to be qualified to identify environmentally linked illness. Good health is no longer just about diet and exercise. It's also about what we breathe and what we touch. So let's go into what are the best right now, what are the best MPH, PhD programs in America right now compared to the University of Miami. Harvard ranked #1, Columbia 2, Johns Hopkins 3, University of Miami in the arena of environmental health, unranked. Okay, so how do we come up with these numbers? This is a chart, you don't need to look at it in detail, but on the left, it shows the school Harvard. And on the right, it shows the comprehensive environmental health programs for MPH, PhD programs. You can see that Harvard is rich and robust in this area of medicine. This is the next chart, Columbia, ranked #2 on the left. And you look at the curriculum in the middle, and you look at the specific programs that they're offering. It's robust and detailed. You don't need to look at these details. I'm going to send them to you. Johns Hopkins, number 3, again, a robust program in environmental health. Now, compare those to the University of Miami, unranked MD, PhD program. And if you look to the right in the red, the comprehensive environmental health program only requires one course in environmental health called Aspects of Environmental Health. So when a doctor graduates from the University of Miami with an MD, PhD degree, they have only had one environmental health course. Now, I should also mention that in the MD program, although there are no required environmental health courses, there is one sub-pathway among 28 sub-pathways that they could take electives in environmental health. But the bottom line here is we've got MDs that are graduating with no environmental health instruction with an MD degree and only one course with an MPH degree. We can do better than that. So what I'd like to talk to you now about is the best environmental health MD residency fellowship programs. Okay, so this is different than required courses. This is what are the medical schools that are actually offering a residency or fellowship program in environmental health? Well, of course, Harvard's at the top again, number 1. Johns Hopkins is number 2. And Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York, number 3. And University of Miami, unranked. Let's talk about the environmental health programs in the state of Florida, not nationally, but in the state of Florida. Now, these are the best environmental health programs in the state of Florida, looking at the MPH, PhD, and the fellowship programs. University of South Florida has an occupational medicine residency program, and they're ranked 16th. University of Florida is ranked 37th in environmental health, although they do not have a fellowship program. And FIU in environmental health is ranked 49th in the United States, although they do not have a fellowship program. But the University of Miami is unranked in environmental health and has no fellowship program. And these are the details of what we just spoke about here. This is University of South Florida. You can see the robust program they have in environmental health, that they have an occupational residency program. You can see what the University of Florida is doing. They have, a decent amount of environmental health courses, and you can see the University of FIU, which is ranked 49th. They have a robust program. Lastly, University of Miami, not much going on there, not much going on. So now I'd like to pivot into what is the University of Miami doing for environmental health community outreach programs? Currently, we have no on-campus community outreach programs, but we can have a robust community program at the University of Miami. And we already have something ready to launch right now. Dr. Kumar invented a handheld device that measures particulates, volatile organic compounds, pollens, and molds real time. So what that means is you could walk into any classroom or faculty office on campus holding this device and instantly see if the air is safe. This device can help our students and faculty stay safe. And it's patentable, a valuable asset that the University of Miami partially owns. I know this because I've spoken to the University of Miami intellectual property lawyers. This is just one example of how the university's valuable intellectual property not only enhances university health, but can also generate funds for the University of Miami. So let's now pivot to the nursing program. My wife is a nurse. It is a noble profession. And we are ranked 34th in our nursing school, thanks to the great work of Dean Monroe. Our nurses need to be, they're on the front lines, and they need to know how to recognize environmental injury or illness up front to determine how to treat a patient. If we get it wrong up front, the patient's outcome is jeopardized on the back end. Unfortunately, currently, we have no environmental health courses in our School of Nursing at the University of Miami. Now let's pivot on to the School of Law. It's my belief that it's important for you as medical leaders to know what your environmental patient experiences in the legal arena so you understand their entire plight. Likewise, it's also important for you to understand what your potential role is in the legal arena as a medical expert. Now, our law graduates need to know how to represent an injured environmental victim in court. In instances when governmental regulations fail to protect a patient, and when he or she is environmentally injured and there is no medical treatment available, often your patient and his or her family will lose their health, their life savings, and their home. That's a pretty steep hit for environmental injury. But finally, the final safety net is the lawyer who can recoup their damages in court. So it's important for you to understand that when a lawsuit is filed, the patient's clinicians, their treating doctors and nurses, are drawn into the lawsuit that's filed as expert medical witnesses in court. You may be required to testify in deposition or at trial, and you may need to know what you're in for. And it's for this reason that I've taught medical students at other medical university schools on how to best perform in the legal arena as an expert witness. So the bottom line here is that the legal and the medical arenas are interconnected. But currently, the UM Law School offers no courses on how to represent an environmental victim in court. Here's an example of a top law school environmental justice program, Pace University Law School. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. helped build this program. I've had the honor to work with him on a massive toxic tort case. And we could do this too here at the University of Miami Law School. It's not that difficult, and we're not that far away from being able to do this. With the dean we have now, and the current dean that's coming in, who came from Notre Dame, this is something we could just really jump into. So here's an example of a toxic tort case. This is a legal case that I handled in Boston. I represented the Holy Cross College head football coach. He was sitting in his office inside his school gymnasium as they resurfaced the gymnasium floor. He was exposed to toluene. No one told him that it was dangerous, but unfortunately for him, he had the ALS gene that was dormant in his body. But once the toluene exposure turned on his ALS gene, which was activated, the consequence is he died. We proved this connection in court for the first time ever, that chemical exposure can activate the onset of ALS. This landmark case ended up on the cover of the American Bar Association Journal and the American Journal of Industrial Medicine. You have the sites on it. I would urge you to look at these sites once you get my email. The key to this case was our expert witness, Dr. Ratner, a neurotoxicologist. Without Dr. Ratner's testimony, we had no case. And in any environmental injury case, it's the doctor that is the key to the case. And most likely, without your valuable testimony, the patient will have no case. So once again, this is an illustration that the medical and the legal arenas are interconnected. So let me go to the next slide here. Among the top 100 law schools as ranked in US News and World Report, the one law school with the highest gap between earnings and debt is the University of Miami School of Law. Students at the U who used federal grants to borrow a median of $168,000. But 2 years after graduation, only half were earning $59,000 or less. So why is this relevant to our discussion? It's relevant because ultimately, in my view, it's unrealistic to think that our law school tuition is going to decrease. So the best approach is to make our law degree more valuable, which will help our law graduates' earnings and make our law degree more competitive. Now, there are several ways to make our law degree more valuable. I am sure the dean sitting in this room here has a lot more ideas than I do, but there's one way we could do this, one among many ways. And this is how it relates to our discussion today. We can teach our law students how to handle a toxic tort case. So when a client who is poisoned by an environmental exposure walks into a University of Miami law graduate's office and needs legal representation, our law graduates will be qualified to help. And because environmentally linked disease is exploding, toxic tort cases are mushrooming. We can bolster better earnings for our grads by preparing them for the reality of today's toxic environment. So we can make this commitment to environmentally linked disease. It's no longer just about our genes. It's also about our environment. So in closing, I would just like to say that acknowledge that our medical school is ranked 45th in the country, and that's kudos to Dean Ford. And the entire university is ranked 49th, and that is quite impressive, President Frenk. But we can even do better. We can invest into a strong MD, MPH residency and fellowship environmental health program. This will attract more talented medical students and better educate them as clinicians and generate more government-funded scientific research. One way among many is to launch this endeavor is to recruit a nationally recognized scientist to build our program from the ground up and hire the best researchers and professors. I think it would be a 5 to 10 year endeavor, and this administration can leave a lasting legacy for the U and our community. And President Frenk is the best one to lead this effort because he was part of this before at Harvard. And with the strong leadership of Dean Ford, Dean Shelby, Dean Monroe, Chairman Lee, Josh Friedman, and Dr. Kumar, we can do this. I'm available to help and support you in any way. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity to share these items with you. And thank you for your amazing leadership of the University of Miami.
Thank you so much. It's a very impressive presentation. Let me open it up for comments or reactions. Who wants to?
Yeah, I would say that our MD MPH program is the largest combined MD MPH program in the country. So students get both degrees in 4 years, and of course they're well grounded in public health, and to have an environmentally focused residency program that they could graduate, kind of move right into, would be quite powerful. And of course, if we have the faculty that were doing that, then there's opportunity for curricular reform, which you mentioned, Alan, as well as something that is kind of needed for all of our medical students to have, a better grounding in that type of training. So I would see a value added there as well. So it's a very exciting proposal.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you.
I wanted to just add for a number of years, we've had this course called The Hospital, and I think you've taught it. And it is something that brings together interdisciplinary, many different schools, the med school, the law school, to focus on hospitals as entities. and nursing school, and, you know, and I could imagine, because I think the business school, I mean, I could imagine a similar course, because I do think this is an incredibly important topic, inherently interdisciplinary, about environmental health and toxins and so on, bringing together, you know, all of these schools, nursing, business, that school, the public health department, and so on. I mean, that might be, you know, one thing that we want to take a look at. I think in the law school, I mean, I have to say, just on behalf of the law school, that Wall Street Journal article was deeply misleading, but, you know, but this is an opportune time for us, I mean, because we have a new environmental law professor, and toxic tort regulation is something we want to focus more on. We have some of that. We have a clinic. You're correct. We don't have specifics about toxic tort litigation, other than some that's been done by the environmental justice clinic. But I think you're right. That's an important area. This is really spurred a kind of a look ourselves. We've been ongoing as to what we might, you know, want to offer in the area. But I think that the idea of getting law students and business students, nursing, medicine, public health, and just, you know, something like this, because it is cancer, but, you know, it's also like the lead in the water, the Flint case, and then it's the plastics in the environment that all end up in our bodies. And I mean, it's kind of a gargantuan topic, which is a little daunting, but also a little inviting.
And I would say that some of those, some of the scaffolding we would need to do this is already there, because in addition to the MD, MPH, there's also a 4+1 for our Bachelor of Science in Public Health students, where they do the MPH concurrently with finishing their undergraduate degree in public health, which was just extended to the health sciences student in our school. And we've had discussions about doing the 4+1 with the nursing students. So they would do a,
Oh, wow.
and I think that's really the group who might benefit most, is the undergraduate nursing, to then do an MPH kind of concurrently with them.
Right.
And that would build a really nice interdisciplinary cadre. I would also say, though, if you get to offer an objection, I'll offer one as well. So we do not in the School of Nursing and Health Studies have a course that is labeled environmental health. But as with the medical school, social determinants of health are a huge part of our curriculum. And our students do take epidemiology, they take global health, they take public health nursing, all of which has environmental influences and risks and benefits woven throughout the curriculum. So you can't put your finger on an environmental course, but the content is woven through, probably not in a dose that you would think would be large enough, but the essential elements of it are there.
So I think, Alan, what I gleaned from your really compelling presentation is that UM could benefit from whether it's a department or an interdisciplinary program focusing on environmental health. And the investment would be to get a well-established, recognized individual who is a leading scholar, thought authority in that field, in that domain, to begin to lead such a program, which will be which has to be interdisciplinary in nature, involving most of our schools, and which also aligns very well with the concept of the resiliency academy that we've been talking about. So I couldn't agree with you more. I think we collectively need to start looking about while doing a feasibility study and see what exactly would be required to launch such an initiative, and decide with the provost whether this is a priority within for the university. But we certainly make a very compelling case for why it can happen and why we can lead in that domain. Because I'm thinking the other people who should have been invited to this gathering, because we've been working with them, is for team, who is really the dean of the School of Engineering, who is an expert on aerosols, and of course I know that Ronnie Habersol, so in the dean of the School of Marine Atmospheric Sciences, so it's the School of Marine Atmospheric Sciences. So the elements, as Cindy already mentioned, are there, and so we can easily put that in position. We have the foundation, we have the substrate to really potentially develop a very solid program in environmental health. That's interesting.
It does sound like an area, once those elements are drawn together and aggregated, that philanthropy could help galvanize them and bring in the missing pieces and perhaps the leadership to bring all of that together.
You know, we first of all, really the fantastic presentation and your book, and thank you. I got your copy of the book. I appreciate it very much. It's a very impressive piece of work, and I mean, all your combination of litigation and your lived experience just gives you a level of an advocacy and activism around this. Just it's great to have an alum and a member of our President's Council just leading this the way you have, Alan. The university does have a lot of assets in this space, and I think you know, this could be a very interesting focus for what's been a priority for me, which is to bring together the multiple disciplinary perspectives around pressing problems. Dean Ford just mentioned, I mean, I was exactly thinking, we have what, you know, in the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences, we have all the group of climate scientists, and of course, the issues of environmental contamination with poisoning elements is deeply connected with issues related to the climate. They are, you know, parts of a continuum of abuse on our planet, with then terrible consequences for the human species. And then we just recruited, as of January of this year, a new dean of the College of Engineering, Pratim Biswas, member of the National Academy of Engineering, which is a core part of environmental health. In fact, you know, in the origins of public health, public health came out of the marriage of the engineering tradition of sanitary engineering, of the social activism around all the social ills that were created by rapid urbanization, especially in England, and then, you know, mobilized through the injection of the insights from microbiology and the rise of the germ theory in the 19th century. There was that conjunction of those three pieces that created modern public health. So engineering is a big part, and we now have a dean who's just created a department of chemical and environmental engineering. And because as Dean Ford was saying, his own area of expertise is in aerosols. So he is a practitioner of and a scientist in environmental engineering. And you know, the reason why Harvard has such a strong the School of Public Health is because you see chemists, engineers, physicists, the work of Professor Spengler, who did all this research on the sick buildings that you were alluding to, Jack Spengler. It's this interdisciplinary connection, along with more of, you know, people more in the health sciences, that creates this field. But we have all those pieces, we have all those disciplines. We need to put them together. And I have two specific proposals, because I think we could develop something even bigger, but we could do two things in short order. We have created an instrument called ULINK, Laboratory for Integrated Knowledge, which provides small grants for teams. Initially, it was to develop research projects, but it's now being extended to courses. And Dinesh namely was talking about the course that the law school has hosted, but has participation from 7 or 8
Yes.
schools on hospitals. I've been teaching in that course. We could create a course and develop a proposal to get some internal funding. It's not a lot of money. And soon launch a course on environmental health with the 3 schools represented here, and I would add the School of Marine Sciences and the College of Engineering. And then the more ambitious project, and that does require philanthropy, is that for our campaign, we've been working on a concept of academies. Academies are functional arrangements. They're not structures, they're not new structures. They are functional arrangements to join different groups in multiple schools that share an interest, but it provides a functional arrangement to create a matrix where that interaction can be systematized and funded. So the leading project there is something we are calling the Academy of Planetary Resilience. And this is a key dimension of that, which Dean Ford just mentioned a minute ago. It has huge components from the medical school, especially the Department of Public Health Sciences, Dr. Kumar, from all the schools represented here, from the school and the 2 I mentioned, plus others, because architecture has been working, by the way, that's another group that would be interesting. Architecture has now a whole group because it's a School of Architecture, but it's actually more well known for being a school of urban studies and urban planning. It's a little bit of an incomplete description of the School of Architecture. And part of the issue is creating resilient cities, part of the big projects they have. And that includes environmentally sustainable cities, which include cities that don't poison their inhabitants. Since a lot of the problems you're describing, as your numbers at the beginning show, affect not only urban dwellers, but preponderantly urban dwellers. So we should also actually include architecture now that I think about this. Anyway, we could do the 2 things in a short term, a course, and I think the deans here can put together a group and who would then, I think we have here probably 3/4 of the people who would participate in that course. We need to supplement with a few others who are not here and start offering a course. And the courses have proven to be a great starting point that then triggers other collaborations among the faculty members that participate in teaching together. But in parallel, we are working on this idea of the Academy for Planetary Resilience, and that's just a holding name. I think the idea of a group, an academy, as we call it, focusing on environmental issues that affect there's this. I'm sure you're very familiar with this concept of One Health, which includes the health of humans, the health of other animals, in addition to our species of animals, and the health of the planet. And it tries to combine that, and that has implications for the sort of problems you are talking about, Alan, problems derived from pollution. It has huge implications for pandemics. It has huge implications for climate change. They are completely interlinked. So the idea of this academy is to pull together those strands. But when you're talking about more directly, environmental poisoning, environmental pollution, is core to that idea of One Health, that integrated concept of health, of not just of the humans, certainly centrally of the human, we're very interested in our health, but also the way we are risking the health of our entire planet. So I think we can follow up on some of these components and eventually maybe start with a course, but grow that into other components that might be, that might be up to the level or scale of this big challenge.
So the
I think
course
this is,
has an
can I
easier-
interject for a second?
Sure.
Okay, so I think the point Ellen is making is at the University of Miami, we don't have deep enough expertise in the field of environmental health. Offering a course certainly is the starting point. For example, environmental health that President Frenk is saying, we do offer this course for our MD, MPH student. We do offer this course for our MPH student. But most of the students are not exposed to environmental health. However, this course does provide an understanding of what environmental conditions are linked with what kind of disease. So on an average, every week I receive 2 or 3 calls from community members. And largely because I have a couple of videos on the environmental insult, especially indoor air pollution in and around Miami area. And they call me saying, hey, I moved to this house. My symptoms are not going away. One of the person is still contacting. I sent a team on 14th of August to do the monitoring, say I changed everything. And as a matter of fact, we analyzed some of the sample, same came back. This is more deteriorated, largely because two-thirds of the home in Miami are mold infested. With regard to climate and health, now when we quantify their pollution problems, that thing stops there. I cannot treat them. They say, hey, do you have any occupational health expert who you can refer me to? And I say, we don't. I simply just provide whatever public health guidance I can, because I'm not an MD. I cannot bring the person to my clinic or anything and treat him. So we don't have that expertise, number one. Number two, let's say somebody is found to have some symptoms and somebody want to pursue a litigation on that. We don't have good enough expertise saying, hey, we observed that kind of pollution, this person got affected. And in order to generate evidence, what Ellen was showing in one of the examples, identifying genes, identifying what biological responses, we need to have that kind of centralized laboratory facilities that we can work on. And thirdly, the issue that matters the most in Miami is just not only the air, food, and water. We're seeing lots of algae bloom. Assume for a second you are playing outdoor, you have harmful algae bloom, you went out in the afternoon, you're in a room. How do I tie in that connection? The algae bloom, the red tide aerosol that I was breathing is causing my issue. We need to have a scientific lab where we characterize this. Then we need to have a medical lab, identify what are the biological responses of this and whether the disease is linked to this or not. So these are just 2 of these issues. And with regard to the social determinant of health and climate, as a matter of fact, when we talk about climate, 95% of the disease burden is largely because changing climate and extreme weather patterns do modify environmental conditions. Think about a hurricane that we observed. In case of Maria hurricane that we witnessed, the total number of deaths that were quantified were in the magnitude of only 100. But when your home is damaged, you have mold, you don't have access to clean water, you don't have food, and many of the diseases that are linked to these pollution that happen or food contamination that happen, they're not tied to hurricanes, for example, and they go unaccounted for. So when you talk about social determinant, low-income minority population, they get exposed to many of these pollutants disproportionately. So in summary, what Ellen is saying is, yes, this providing this understanding is key, but having the top-notch expertise to drill down and provide the answers from litigation point of view, from medicine point of view, from treatment point of view, from management point of view is critical. And we can champion that.
Absolutely. In my view, Dr. Kumar is right on point. Yes, there's global warming. Yes, we want to save the whales and the birds and the trees and the ice caps. We want to do all those things. But we're bleeding right now with environmentally linked diseases. Right now, and the University of Miami is not putting out doctors who could treat people with this. They have no idea when a patient walks into their office what's wrong with them from an environmental standpoint or how to treat them from an environmental standpoint. And if they walk into a lawyer's office, There's no University of Miami trained lawyer that could take on a case and represent them they've been injured in court. Yes, they teach our lawyers about the global warming, and they teach our lawyers about that kind of stuff and governmental regulations, and that's all good stuff. But I'm talking about the most basic things that human beings in this community, in this state, in this country need right now. And they need doctors who understand what environmentally linked disease is. And when they see it, they can identify with it. And we need lawyers to do the same thing. And we need the scientists and the laboratories, like Dr. Kumar said. We don't have that infrastructure at the University of Miami. They have it at Harvard. They have it at other schools. They even have more at Florida International, which is right across the street from us. University of Miami, we can do better. We can do better. We can compete against at least the Florida schools. We can do this. And we need to, in my view, hone in the most important things that we need here and now. And that is doctors that could recognize and treat this, lawyers who could recognize and recover, and scientists who could do the proper things in laboratories, and scientists who could get NIH grants that the government's going to pay for, and further bolster our program in a robust, rich, comprehensive way. We're not doing that.
Well, it's a very interesting challenge for this kind of integration. And I'm aware of the courses that are being taught. I was talking about a course that brings together all the other components as a way of just in a short period of time get things started. But why don't we agree on I'll ask the deans, and obviously we have Dr. Lee and Dr. Kumar to think about putting together a proposal. Obviously, with different levels of ambition. I do think that starting with something that involves all the schools in the short run becomes a way of just raising the visibility of this. But that doesn't mean that we stop there. I think we can, and as Dr. Lee was saying, maybe providing a pathway where some of the students we already have in the pipeline for the MPH who could then go on into a residency that would produce the kind of clinicians you're talking about, plus the programs that already the nursing school has, and what Dean Schneiderly mentioned of the law. There's things we could do in the relatively short term, and then there's a longer term, more ambitious agenda that we are actually working on as part of the campaign, where we would, which is going to be one of our priorities in fundraising. We have this 4 years still in our campaign to 2025, and the sort of issues we're talking about are front and center in those priorities. But I want to thank you, Alan. I mean, this has been very, very energizing, as you saw, lots of interest. We've identified some other people that will try to also bring together to the table, and a couple of things that we could start doing in the relatively short term. Sharing your idea that we ought to elevate our game at the University of Miami. But again, on a foundation of assets we already have, I think we need to supplement with areas where we still don't have the necessary depth, and then also connect what we have, because that's the parallel challenge we have, that sometimes we need to create those synergies among the different disciplines and schools. And this certainly provides a very interesting focal point for that. But
President Frenk, can I suggest one thing?
Sure.
Since we right now don't have any mandatory course for any of the undergrad student or the graduate student, can we run a kind of campus-wide seminar about environmental literacy? What kind of health risks are associated with, for example, air that you're breathing? water you're drinking, or food you are eating. And
Yeah,
that could be,
absolutely. Absolutely, and that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I mean, if we can create a, the course that we were using as an analogy is a course that runs on Saturdays. It's more of a seminar, the kind you're talking about.
Right.
But it involves like 6 or 7 schools. I think something like that would be exciting, and it could be on environmental literacy. This should be a topic that interests every single one of our students. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
what they specialize on.
and not only this, the course does also can include some of the measures that I teach my student. Let's say you're exposed to this. How do you really counteract it? Assume you have been living in a home and you have been consuming, for example, lots of pesticide for the past 10 years. Is there a way to counteract it? We have lab experimental data. We also have public health data that some of these simple exercises can counteract some of these effects, and at least it can help prevent further deterioration. So we have measures in place to prevent many of these environmental disease burdens.
And South Florida has the highest usage of pesticides per capita than any other city in the United States because of the hot, humid climate.
Yeah. No, it's clearly a huge topic. We can think of sort of concentric circles, the sort of environmental literacy that would appeal to students from all over, a much more focused second group of people already in the schools here, and then maybe enhancements. I like what Dr. Lee said of taking students already on the pipeline, or Cindy on the pipelines already are training to be health professionals, maybe adding a layer that would allow them to deepen. And then the most ambitious circle is this idea of the Academy Planetary, because that's the largest, most ambitious, that does require substantial philanthropic support, and it's, as I said, it's one of the big bold ideas in our campaign. But why don't then I think if you can designate people, the deans I'm talking to, that could follow up and maybe start with some of those ideas, and then follow up on what we mentioned, and arrange for a follow-up Zoom, or if you happen to come down to Miami, Alan, to a meeting to follow up on some of these ideas.
I would be
But I
happy.
want to thank you for triggering a very exciting discussion, and hopefully we can move this needle in a significant way. It's great to see you, and thank you again. Dean Ford and I are going to run because today we have the white coat ceremony,
Right.
specifically for our first year students. So, but it's good to have you, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Thank you all.
I'll see you soon.
It's all about you.
Yep.
Bye.
Don't forget.
Thank you, Alan. You take care.
Okay, bye.